All right, hello, welcome. This is Dr. Nick Taylor with the Center for Mental Health, and we have Laura Byard as well, Regional Director for Center for Mental Health as well. And we are very excited to be here to answer just a few questions and kind of have a discussion about coping with COVID. Laura, what are some of your thoughts as we kind of look at this initial topic of coping with COVID? And we'll be taking some questions, of course, as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We're glad to be here with everyone this morning. Thanks, Nick. It's good to be here. For me, I think that this is a really stressful time. It's stressful for our community. This is not something that we've ever dealt with before, and we are glad to have this opportunity to talk with our community and to answer any questions that anyone might have.
You know, I don't know what you've heard, but people I'm talking to, it's almost like they're going through something they've never experienced before. Are you kind of hearing the same thing?
Absolutely. I definitely am hearing that. I mean, everything's flipped upside down. Our normal coping systems aren't available. Our support systems are all confused. Things we'd had planned are not going the way we had thought. So, yeah, it's completely upside down all over the place.
You know, and I really like the topic that we have. So we're talking about coping. And coping to me suggests that there is a way to get through this. And so as we're taking your questions and we're looking at different kinds of topics, we're trying to keep that as kind of our focus, that there is a way of coping, there is a way of kind of getting through this. I was just thinking today about the fact that, you know, it's almost like a cabin fever kind of situation where people are in their homes and they're sequestered and they're, you know, quarantined. In fact, our 15-year-old daughter, she put a sign on her bedroom door that says quarantine. And basically what she means is, hey, leave me alone. I'm playing Minecraft right now or something like that, you know. But it's something that's a little different. But it strikes me that it is something that we can really get through. So I have an article that I just read yesterday out of the Wall Street Journal, and maybe others have seen it. It's absolutely fantastic. And the writer is simply talking about how being quarantined in her home or having this stay-at-home order is allowing her and her family to kind of work through some things and get a little bit closer. So they're finding themselves playing games like they haven't before. They're fixing meals together, all the kinds of things that they weren't able to do before because of our busy, competitive, got to go do this, got to go do that kind of lives. Now we're able to do. And that really kind of struck a chord in me because I felt like it's been that way in our home a little bit. We're suddenly playing games more, interacting with each other more. And it also makes me wonder, well, that seems to work out well with people who have families in their home. Laura, I don't know, what you thought about, you know, what about people who may not have children at home, or may not, you know, may even be alone, and what that might be like for them?
Yeah, absolutely. I was just thinking about that. Very similar experience for us. Like, normally, April and May are incredibly busy if you have kids. And so to be in this place of like, what day is it? Who knows? Are we starting school today? I think we are. You know, to just be in this place of trying to figure it out and finding some activities to do that we hadn't thought about in a long time. And also, you know, checking on people who I know are alone or people who are older. People who might have some specific concerns related to what's going on in our country, and certainly family from other parts of the country, you know, friends who are in New York. There's a lot to check on and think about right now, and how do we get through and cope with all of the stress.
Right. In fact, we just had a question come in, and it looks like it's exactly about that question is, how do we cope with stress during this time? Yeah. And I think we can talk about kind of the standard methods of coping with stress anyway, and see how those kind of standard methods, of those skills, those coping skills might apply even in a situation like this. But there might also be some other things that are a little bit unique about this circumstance that we have to keep in mind. So just a couple ideas, and then Laura, of course, anything that you think. You know, coping with stress in general is really about kind of keeping things in perspective. In the field of psychology and psychotherapy, we have a term called decatastrophizing, which means that we take something that might seem to be a catastrophe and we try and, put it more into kind of a more manageable frame through which we can perceive what it is that might be going on. So it might seem like, oh no, is this ever going to end? What about this and what about that? We can really overwhelm ourselves with questions and concerns and worries. And some of those just may not be necessary because right now we just don't have a lot of answers. So I guess maybe a place to start in terms of how we cope with stress during this time is that we be really careful with what it is we're trying to solve or what it is we're trying to figure out or cope with at that moment. It's the whole, we're going to eat an elephant, let's do it just one bite at a time. Hey, what am I going to do today? Well, for starters, let's just get up and make the bed. I don't know if you ever thought of that. You want to start the day right? Let's just get up and I'm going to start by just making the bed. Well, the first thing it does, it kind of gets me out of the bed, right? And then it gets me moving on the day and hey, everybody likes a bed that's made. And then, all right, well, what's next? Well, I don't have to go to an office or I don't have to go to a place of work today, but I do need to kind of get myself going and keep myself on a bit of a routine and maybe help others in my family or others that I influence to also stay on a routine of some kind. And that whatever that next right thing might be, I heard someone say that once, what is the next right thing, or the next best thing that it is that I need to do? And kind of keeping that as a focus. So those are some, I guess, kind of some initial thoughts. And Laura, as you think about ways to cope with stress during this time, what comes to your mind?
Yeah, I think for me, kind of the first is identifying like stress is different for everyone, right? Like my stress, your stress, someone else's stress. So figuring out kind of what are the signs for me that I am stressed. So I have to start kind of there of like, is my heart beat up a little bit? Am I feeling tense? Am I more irritable or angry than I used to be? And so really identifying like, how do I know I'm stressed? And usually with that kind of anxiety stress, it's a physical feeling for me.
Right.
And so then I need to know, then I can do like something about it. Like, so what can I do to get myself to burn off some of that energy? I know for me, it's moving or creating something, being creative. I think that's where kind of cooking comes in for me sometimes, where at other times that might be a stressful thing to have to cook all the time. But if I'm able to be creative, then it helps me relax. Sometimes just that basic taking a couple deep breaths when I know I'm stressed. Like that can be incredibly powerful. I love the making the bed and kind of putting some order, in my day. That's also helpful for me. And so it really depends on kind of the nature of kind of how am I feeling it and what is my level of being overwhelmed with my stress right now. And it may be that, I think given the nature of what our community is dealing with, if it happens to do with job change or job loss, financial stress, health, then addressing those very specific stressors would be important.
Right.
In order to bring that stress down.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I don't know if you've noticed this, but in our family, we've really enjoyed memes. I mean, there are just some fantastic memes that are coming out right now. And we find that a little bit of humor can go a long ways in dealing with stress. And, I saw one the other day, maybe others have seen it, but Laura, you mentioned how, we're all getting a little more crafty now than perhaps we have in the past. And there was a meme about craft gone out of control, and it was someone who basically knitted a bodysuit for themselves, kind of thing. And so I think just being able to keep a sense of humor. So whether it's watching memes or our family, our 15-year-old daughter taught us about TikTok. I didn't even know what TikTok was. And now we're watching TikToks and we're watching people who are doing funky dances and who are doing athletic kind of maneuvers all alone. Yeah. That's been enjoyable for us, just kind of finding new things that we can enjoy.
Completely agree. We had a question come in about how to cope with PTSD and depression. I think it really, again, varies from person to person and what that means, and what some of the challenges might be based on an individual's experience and what this kind of brings up at this time or makes challenging at this time. I think one of the things for me, Nick, you tell me what you think. As a mom and as a person, I think what I've really needed right now is to kind of lower my expectations. So when this first started, I had all these kind of thoughts of like stuff I was going to get done because we have to be home anyway, right? And most of that, is not going to get done. And our kids have lots of requirements from the schools. They have things that they need to get done. But again, like just lowering our expectations of ourselves and of our community and of each other right now, I think is really important. We are in a situation where we don't really know what's going to happen, where there's a lot of things we can't control and a lot of things we can't predict. And that can be very stressful and can certainly, looking through the lens of trauma, that can be traumatic. And so I think one of the more important things for me right now is just to give ourselves grace.
Right.
Back to your point, Nick, a few minutes ago, of making sure we don't make this bigger than it already is. It's
right.
So reminding ourselves that this is temporary. Temporary might be weeks, but it's still going to be temporary, and then we will start to return to a semblance of normal.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more, and I think that concept of managing expectations really comes to play as we're coping with COVID. A real example in our family, a big concern of ours, having raised teenagers, we have one left at home right now, but is screen time. It's like, how much time do we let our kids spend on screens? And that's not just teenagers, then that's really all kids, because so much of what they're doing, has to do with screens. And we have found that actually her screen is kind of her way of connecting to the outside world. And she refers to her online friends as if that's her real peer group right now. And so we've kind of had to lower our expectations in terms of how much time she might be spending on screens, and recognizing that this is right now how we're connecting. Look at this right here.
Yeah.
We're connecting through a screen, and this is really how we're having to do things. So I agree with that. Just a quick comment about coping with something like PTSD or depression. I think that raises a very important issue, and that is that there are such things as kind of pre-existing mental health issues or mental health issues that maybe were going on even before this whole pandemic hit. And the pandemic, may be making those mental health issues a little worse for someone who has PTSD. I was, believe it or not, communicating with a veteran who was talking about how, this experience is almost like it was when they were in combat. And so it brought a lot of kind of those same feelings back. And, if you're someone who, when you're depressed, you tend to isolate, well, we're kind of isolating now anyway. So that might, make depression a little bit even more pronounced. So I think it's important as we look at those mental health issues, either new ones that are starting to surface, or perhaps some mental health issues that were kind of going on even before, we have some ideas of what to do. And I think now might be a great time for us to mention some of the services that are available through the Center for Mental Health, as we're trying to make sure as the community mental health center for our area, we can have those services available. So Laura, in your position as someone who helps make sure that those services are readily accessible and there for our communities, what would you say to someone who's now maybe struggling either with new mental health issues or maybe even some pre-existing issues that are now starting to maybe get a little worse for them?
Sure, absolutely. So now is actually a time when therapy is easily available. And so therapists like Nick and I are doing can come into your home and talk with you and set up therapy sessions via televideo or even telephone. And so if there is a need for therapy services or a desire to start therapy or continue therapy, that's actually really available and can be set up easily by calling our main line. And so that's something that I want to encourage people to know that they have available, and whether it's through the center or somewhere else, you can definitely get therapy right now. And we also have a support line that's open 24 hours a day. And so there's another question that came in about, how do we support someone else's mental health given the stay-at-home order? Knowing our support line number, which is 970-252-6220, and maybe we can put that in the comment section so it's available. Having that number so that no matter what time, you can call and consult with someone on our team and get some ideas about what would be next steps. Just knowing that that's available is really important. So that right now, a clinician can come in and we find that people who are engaging in therapy really appreciate that kind of disruption to the mundane, right? Like, here's my time during the week that I get to focus on myself and take care of myself, especially when those of us who are taking care of others are so busy making sure that other people get their needs taken care of. Therapy right now can be some time where you can let someone else take care of you.
Yeah. It's been very interesting. I've only had limited experiences with televideo therapy in the past, and I always kind of thought that you had to be face to face with somebody to really have that meaningful connection with them that is needed for a mental health counseling session. And I have been just really amazed at how easily I've been able to connect with people with whom I've had therapy sessions through televideo. At first we're kind of getting the technology figured out. I got to get microphones and cameras and everything going like it needs to. But then once we have it going and we're having these conversations, it becomes almost like we forget that we're even on video. And I think it really is an opportunity to access mental health services if those are needed. It might be even easier to do it now than it has in the past, because you're not having to go into an office. You're not having to, fill out a whole bunch of paperwork. There's some things that are done, kind of online in preparation for it, but it seems to be even a little easier to access it. So the number to call then, if someone wanted to set up like a televideo session, Laura, what number is that?
So that would be our main line, 970-252-3200.
The 3200, and they would talk to somebody and would kind of get an idea of kind of why they're calling in, kind of the help they're looking for and things like that. And would they be able to kind of talk to a counselor pretty quickly? How does that tend to work?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll get those appointments set up pretty quickly to get someone enrolled, get all of that, information done online or over the phone, and get people set up and ready to go. So, and our team that answers that line can answer any questions regarding insurance or financial or Medicaid enrollment or sliding fee or any of those things. So, any questions, they can get those answered.
Yeah. I've noticed that sometimes people have questions too about, well, who is it that I would talk to? Am I going to talk to somebody who is really, really young, or I'm going to talk to somebody who's really old, or somebody who may be this, or somebody, all of those kinds of questions are important and relevant, and they can be asked, and we can kind of talk about who the different staff members we have, the experience that they have, the number of years that they've been doing this kind of work. And so there's always that opportunity to kind of learn more about the people who work for the Center for Mental Health, because that's really the greatest resource is these people who are available and here to serve the community and help out in these ways. So we're hoping that anyone who needs to access these services will give us a call, and of course we'll work very hard to make sure that services are then put in place just as quickly as possible.
Absolutely.
So,
question about supporting someone else with a stay-at-home order. What are some clever things you've heard about, like if someone has to quarantine, kind of even more than, we're all asked to stay at home. But some people, of course, have been asked to self-isolate or quarantine, also in addition to stay at home. So how do we support each other?
That is a really good question. So let me tell you about a good friend of mine. He actually works as a professor up at Western Colorado University in Gunnison. And as we kind of all know, Gunnison's gone through a bit of a tough time. There's been a lot of cases up there. Well, and it just so happened that right as this was happening, before kind of things really got bad, he had even traveled to Japan. So he's from Gunnison and he traveled to Japan. So there was a strong self-isolation order for him. And he is somebody who's very active and very used to being out and doing things. And so that question that Laura just asked, really came to me. How do I support my friend who is in this kind of a situation? And he and I discovered that there are a lot of social media platforms and virtual ways of interacting that we could do that still made life interesting and meaningful and exciting. So there was a lot of checking in, of course, via texting, things like that. But in addition, we also did Zoom conversations or FaceTime conversations where we had the chance to interact one-on-one. I guess what I've discovered is that it's amazing how creative people are becoming in using some virtual media as a way of connecting. I heard there's a lot of concern about what about older people who are home and maybe alone and not enjoying the connection that they might have had otherwise, and their familiarity with social media and electronic communications may even be limited. And so I heard of a very heartwarming story of a young person who kind of reached out to, I think it was a neighbor even, couldn't go over to that person's house, but reached out via electronic media and did some tutorials for her, helped her figure out how to download WhatsApp or how to use FaceTime or how to, access social media and maybe even find some friends that she might follow and things like that. And then she did something very cool. I like this. She was doing a FaceTime conversation and said, I can't be there with you, but I would love to hear about your life. Do you remember when you were 27 years old? I think that was when you had your first child, wasn't it? Can you tell me about that, what that was like? And then all she did was listen and just listen as her neighbor was able to talk about that experience. And I haven't thought about being 27 for so long. Wow. Well, we were living in Denver at that time. My husband was working for the railroad, and just a long, wonderful conversation that I think really made a difference in the life of that person. So I think we get creative. We look for ways to connect. We think about the fact that we still care about each other. We can still be interested in each other, and we can still establish those kinds of connections that are beneficial and meaningful.
I think that's a great idea. I love that storytelling.
I'd heard some discussion of doing pen pals, and there was even concern about, can we mail things to each other? Is it safe to send something through the mail? It seems like it is. I guess we can always err on the side of caution and try and figure out those ways that we can still do those connections electronically. So if we're going to draw a picture, like a child's going to draw a picture for a grandparent, well, maybe we just take a picture of that picture, and maybe we text it instead of mailing it, since we don't know for sure on some of those things, but we're just looking for creative ways of connecting.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's wonderful. Any sort of way to stay in connection with those that we care about.
Yeah. It looks like we have another question that came in. Are there ways to get my teenager to open up about her stress?
Yeah, so I think what I've been thinking about a lot about teenagers, because like right now we are counter to everything that a teenager is, right?
Right.
Teenagers and young adults, I would say, though, those who are have been made to come home from college during their, what should have been their spring semester, or young adults who are working and are now back at home. That's a really hard time because our brains at that time are really wired for social connection, and not really wired for family. And so it's tough, especially on that group. I find that getting out and getting outside and going for a walk is really helpful. That we're still kind of out and can safely walk without anyone around us. And just getting out of the house, because right in the house, in my house, we all get in our little spaces and we're doing our thing. And so that's kind of a harder place for us to have conversations. But if we kind of break up that norm and get outside the house and go for a walk, then dialogue comes a lot more easily.
Yeah.
And then talking about like, no, this really sucks right now. Like, there's a lot that you were looking forward to. There's a lot that you aren't going to be able to do, whether that's a band concert or a sporting event or just hanging out with friends. Like that's a lot of loss. And so I don't try to sugarcoat that. I just I sit with her on like that's that's disappointing. I'm sorry for that, and not try to even make it better by saying we'll reschedule or there will be other times in the future, because I don't want I think what teenagers need is an open place to be like it's not okay.
Right.
I'm mad. I'm upset. This sucks. I don't like it. And just sit with them in that place.
Right. And I love how you aren't like saying, hey, it's all going to be better by this date, because we just don't know. I think our kids probably know that, and they know if we're being truthful with them, because we really can say on some things. And, maybe some things that we said were going to happen, now they find out aren't going to happen. So we really do have to be cautious. I think that it's very important that we be good examples, for our teenagers. We always kind of have to lead by example. And so helping a teenager to open up about stress, I think would require, first of all, that we're not hesitant at all about talking about our own stress. Sure. And we might even say things as we're, eating around a dinner table for the first time in a long time. Maybe we look at each other and say, this has been kind of hard. I have some things that I'm concerned about, and I'm, I don't know what else to do other than maybe just talk about it, because talking about it seems to help. And so maybe we choose that moment to start sharing some of the things that we're feeling as a way of kind of priming the pump, if you will. And then we almost may not even have to say anything at that point. And our teenager may say, I'm kind of bummed too, because, what about this? And we say, yeah, wow. And then maybe at least at that point, we kind of establish, well, we don't know what we're going to do. What we do know is that we're kind of going through it together. And maybe we can kind of figure some things out of what we might do. We can figure that out together. So really just kind of keeping that conversation open, because we're allowing ourselves to be a little more vulnerable and making it safe for our teenagers to share as well. So.
Yeah, and I don't know about you, Nick, but I try to remember to ask about friends. How's so-and-so doing? What are they up to? Making sure to check on the people that are important in our kids' lives as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you feel like your kids are still able to maintain those connections with friends, even though they're not able to go spend time with them face to face?
I would say yes, but it's hard. At least that's been my experience, that it's definitely hard to maintain connections.
Right. Let me ask you this, because you're a mother, and I think that you'd have great insight on this. So we have a friend, and she has had some health issues even before this, and has had to be very careful because she takes medications that suppress her immune system. Well, as luck would have it, she has 2 teenage sons at home, and these are very dynamic, popular, great young people who are out doing things and always wanting to be there with their friends. So this has just been torture for these teenage boys to not be able to be out and doing things with their friends. And she has had to explain to them, look, we just can't chance it, because you may not know, you may bring it home, and it may not affect you. And so having those conversations has been really challenging. So how do we sometimes share with our kids that it is a bit of a different world right now, and sacrifices are going to have to be made? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's a tough one. And exactly right. Like, we're all having to make choices right now that we don't like, and that's part of it. And so having some acceptance around that and not sugarcoating that. Like, this is what it is, and this is hard, and this is why, and we have to comply with this. We have to do this, not only for the safety of ourselves or our family or me, but of our community. And so really addressing that head on.
Right, right. Boy, you emphasize communication again, and I think about every answer that we're providing to these questions seems to come down to the importance of communication. So,
yeah, absolutely.
For a lot of people talking about kind of concerns about economics, job loss, and what's going to happen with the economy. Is there going to be a job for me when this is all done? A lot of people are just concerned about the basics of life that really can cause a lot of stress. And there are no easy answers. What would we share with people who are really struggling? Maybe someone who is recognizing that their job is not in high demand and they may have to start doing something, or who knows? What would be some helpful things to share, do you think?
That's really stressful right now. Or it could be that, the person that was the primary worker in the family is now not, and somebody else is. And so roles have shifted. So a lot of stress, or even if there's not job loss yet, potential to worry about job loss. Going back to what you said, Nick, in the beginning of like what could come of all of this? Will I be able to maintain my job? And we know that financial stressors is one of the biggest stressors out there, right? So if you're in a position where you've lost your job or worried about job loss, that's incredibly stressful. And so I think, circling back to our earlier conversation of kind of, taking a moment to gather yourself, taking some deep breaths, assessing the situation. And I know that sometimes avoiding the situation can feel like the right thing to do, but can make it 10 times worse. And so really sitting down and looking at the financial situation if you're dealing with job loss or fear of job loss. And that's hard to do in a stressful time.
Yeah.
Because I know, sometimes applying for relief or applying for financial assistance or applying for Medicaid, like that all takes applications and websites and connecting with people. And when you're feeling overwhelmed, that can feel like it's too much to do. And so really taking some time and taking some breaths and really looking at that straight on and saying, okay, what do I need to do about this situation? Because I don't like the options, I don't like the situation, but what can I do? Is often a place when I'm helping support someone through that, or I've had to look at those things myself. Like that's kind of where I start. How about you, Nick? What are some things that you've
there are a couple things that just really stand out in terms of lessons that I think we've been taught by this pandemic. And the first lesson is that the pandemic is not picky. If you're a human, you're at risk. I realize there's now even some concern, are our pets going to be at risk because there's some animals that have tested positive, but if you're human, you're at risk. And I guess for me, that suggests that there's a universality to being human. And it really is. We are all in this together. And it doesn't matter if we're living in Brazil, if we're living in South Africa, if we're living in Japan, or if we're living in Ukraine. We're all having to deal with this. And I don't know that, like, as a population on the earth, we've ever had this kind of an experience before, because we've never been quite so international and connected across continents and had these kind of global connections like we do now. We really are all influenced by this. Well, if that's true, then what is also true is that we're all kind of going through the same thing. And I would hope that for anyone who's struggling or having those kinds of just gut-wrenching concerns and worries about job loss or about health or other things, to just kind of know that we're all in this together. And if we are all in this together, we've been pretty good at figuring out how to work together and how to find ways through this. What's really struck me is like hearing stories and and the very infrequent times when I am out in public, just seeing how kind and considerate and compassionate people are generally trying to be. I mean, there's so much more waving by people on the other side of the street who are also out walking their dog, or I'm out for a run and there's somebody who's riding their bike. They're a good distance away, but then they're waving and they're greeting.
Yeah.
So I think that knowing that we're kind of all in this together, I think can give us some encouragement in knowing we'll figure out ways to take care of each other. We're going to get our economy strengthened. We're going to get back going as soon as we can. And we're all going to work at it together. So that's what kind of comes to my mind.
Yeah, I know, Nick, and you saying that, I don't know if everyone knows our community agencies that do provide support are meeting twice a week to collaborate and bring resources to the table, apply for grants, do all sorts of things to support our community. Montrose is an amazing community. And so I want to make sure that people know that they haven't accessed services before, but now they need to. There's a whole community that is working to make sure that those services are available and that we get Montrose through this. So, so that there's definitely ways and supports available if people need them. So
that's wonderful.
Yeah,
and it's a good example. I mean, I was on a Zoom call the other day, and I had no idea you could do this, but there were 80 people on that call, all kind of working together and talking about how it is that solutions could be discovered in these kind of tricky situations. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a question about how to access services if everybody's supposed to stay at home. So now is actually a great time to access services. So if you wanted to access services at the center, you could just call 970-252-3200. And we can go through how to access services, what kind of services someone might need or want right now. And then we can do teletherapy or televideo like we're doing today. We can do that to individuals in their home. We've even had some people, because maybe in their home, they weren't able to find a space that was private enough where they wanted to have a therapy session. We've had people go sit in their car and get online and do therapy as to have a nice private space. So we're pretty flexible right now. These services have been made available to us in support of helping our community get through this pandemic. So accessing services right now is actually incredibly easy.
Right. And so it's calling that number 252-3200, and everything's kind of plugged in to make that happen. Is that right?
Yep. And then we'll take it from there as far as what anyone's individual needs are and get them set up for an appointment. You can do that really quickly. Within a couple of days, for sure.
That's wonderful. And I like what you said earlier about there still being those kinds of emergency services available. Let's say somebody needs to talk to someone right now. I think you said the phone number of 252-6220 was a number that could be called, and there would be a professional counselor that could speak with them when they call in. Is that right?
That's correct, 24 hours a day. And then for anybody who doesn't know, our Crisis Walk-In Center, which is on North Cascade, is open 24 hours a day to walk in, or if someone needed further mental health evaluation or substance use treatment, we could evaluate and connect them and possibly admit them into the withdrawal management or the stabilization unit that we have here in Montrose, or connect them with further services if they needed it. So I want people to know that those services for mental health crises or substance use crises, those are still available.
Yeah, I think it's important to know that. And, I feel, I'm sure others feel the same way, just a tremendous sense of appreciation for kind of some of our frontline workers out there. I'm thinking about people that I know personally who work as nurses in ICUs, or who are physicians, or others who are right there on the front line and really having to be there and be a part of this. And I feel a tremendous sense of appreciation and gratitude for them. And I feel the same way for like our crisis line workers who are there 24/7, who want to be available in case somebody needs that. And, mental health is just as important as physical health, even in a challenging time such as this. It's even more so that we be there and help each other that way. So.
And to that point, there's another question, Nick, and you were kind of talking about this earlier. How do I handle family conflict situations brought on by close proximity and extended time together?
Yeah, we're finding we're spending a lot more time with each other, and we're cooped up in the same cabin, so to speak. So, yeah. Well, let's see, Laura, maybe I could say a thing or two about close, intimate relationships, and then if you would like to say a little more, maybe about kind of family relationships as well. We do have concerns right now in our community about how close relationships, close partnerships, marriages, people living together, close relationships, how those relationships are kind of surviving, not only having to be close together for extended periods of time, but there's now a lot of stress. And sometimes, unfortunately, we can take stress out on the people who are closest to us. And so I think really checking in this regard. I don't mean to make it sound as simple as this, but it definitely is a good place to start. If we have to look for a default, we have to look for, kind of our initial response, can it be a kind one? Can we just try to be just a little kinder to each other, a little more aware? So maybe even before, when we were trying to be kind to each other, we try and be so even more so now. So that might mean that we listen to each other. We might ask questions like, wow, I just realized you haven't gone to the gym, and I know that's important to you. Tell me how you're handling that. And then we just listen. We just listen. It shows that, number one, we recognize that there's something important to our partner. And number two, we're really curious on how they're getting through it, and maybe what we can do to help. And that kind of interest and that kind of investment and that kind of kindness that we show is just almost like a gift that we can give to each other. We've talked about communication, and communication is just critical right now, isn't it? That we talk about what we're feeling, we listen to each other. That might mean that we set aside time every single day to make sure that we're communicating. We may feel like we spend all our time with each other because we're in the same house and we're having to be here throughout the day, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we're communicating. So it might mean that we turn off the TV, we close our laptops, we turn off our phones, and we just look at each other and say, hey, I was thinking about something. And this sounds kind of crazy, but it was a thought that I had. I was thinking about something. I don't know what your favorite breakfast cereal is. I've known you all these years, and I don't even know what your favorite breakfast is. I mean, I can guess it could be this or this, but what is it? So maybe we have conversations about things that we never even knew about each other. We used to have a game show on TV called the Newlywed Game, which was always kind of funny because it looked at relationships and how much they actually knew about each other. And, we might assume that we know everything about the other person. I heard someone say something once about their spouse. They said that they felt like their spouse was an undiscovered continent. Oh, that's cool, right? Because there's always more to learn about each other. And if we stay curious, and if we stay interested, and if we stay compassionate and kind and we care, that's going to help us do that. So some initial thoughts in terms of maybe how to help us out in our close, intimate relationships.
I know, yeah. I think for me, it's really important to be mindful of how my mood impacts everyone. So, to what you were saying, if I'm irritable or angry or stressed out right now, then that can impact my kids as well. And so being mindful of that as a parent is really important. I also think that, for my kids, they're also in a difficult situation or maybe more screen time than usual, which kind of makes them irritable or grumpy. And so making sure that we talk about that. So it's okay right now to be frustrated. It's okay to be irritable, but it's not okay to be disrespectful. It's not okay to take that out on each other. So we need to make sure that we are taking care of each other during this time. And maybe taking some time even further apart to get ourselves together before we come back as a family unit. And so sometimes we have to do that. And I think that goes back to our earlier conversation of like, we've relaxed our screen time expectations as well. And so a little more screen time right now is certainly okay. Like when in the future we go back to our norm, we will reinstitute the limits on screen time that we had before. And we'll make those adjustments and it will all be fine. What happens over a few months of life or the growth of my kids is not going to change their life path. And so what we do for a few months to get through this, it's all going to be fine as long as we take care of each other.
Right.
So I think that it's a tough time right now. So just really being kind to ourselves and each of us, and extending grace in our family and taking time apart as we need it and coming together. To Nick, in your point, like being creative, figuring out how to do things, downloading some free Audible books or whatever it is that that we maybe haven't done before, but now can do together as a family is really important. We had another question come in about what are some activities I can do to practice calming my thoughts. That's a good one.
Yeah, that is a really good one.
Yeah, because our thoughts can get completely out of control right now, and that will just make our stress level go up.
Right.
Especially when we can't control it. One of my favorite things when talking about worry is just to remind myself that worry is the attempt to control something that I really have no control over.
Mm-hmm.
So if I can't do anything about this pandemic, I can at least worry about it. And it feels like you're doing something, but instead you're not doing anything. You're just sick.
Yeah.
And so it's a great question. So I always start with that deep breathing. Like that really what we in counseling call belly breathing, where you breathe deep enough to make your belly push out. And so really deep breathing, which is really good right now. Anyway, to take those deep breaths and calming myself down. There's some really good apps available to support calming practices because it can be hard to calm your own self down, especially if you've not practiced it before. So some of those apps might be really helpful. We can load some in a little bit that might in the comments that might be helpful, like Breathe, Virtual Hope Box, or some that come to mind really quickly, and just utilize some of those activities. It can feel like in this moment that I need to like sit on the couch and I need to be on the screen and I need to escape mentally through scrolling. But those things don't really help. And so while it feels like that might be helpful, getting outside, getting some fresh air, getting some sun, finding some things that are funny, to enjoy some laughter, doing some physical activity. Those things are much more calming, even if they're harder to do initially. Nick, what are some of your favorites for calming thoughts?
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with everything you've said. It's very interesting how the practice of yoga has become more and more popular over the last decade or so. And I think it's exactly because of that fact that practicing those poses and practicing the calming experience that yoga is helps somebody kind of get to that more centered, that calmer place. And so there are actually right now kind of virtual yoga opportunities that are out there that you can practice yoga by following someone who's teaching yoga through a YouTube channel or something online. I think also there may have been some calming things that we have done in the past that we kind of have let go because we got too busy. And it is true that now with more time, we can spend some time doing those things. Maybe getting to that, finally reading that book. There's this one book that we've wanted to read for so long and just haven't been able to. Well, for some people, reading is something that can bring a tremendous sense of peace and calm them. So
yeah, and I think one of my favorites is always kind of focusing on my senses as a way to what we in counseling call grounding. Like when you're anxious, you start to flutter and feel like you're out of control, and we want to bring people down. And so really focusing on what are some things that I see right now? Let me let me look around the room and name 5 things that I can see.
Right.
Let me name 4 things that I can hear. Let me name 3 things that I can touch. Let me name a couple things that I can smell, and let me name something that I can taste.
Yeah.
And you can do that in any order, it doesn't matter. The tasting and smelling are harder, so I always make those the small ones for me. But really just focusing on your environment. What can I feel? I can feel the desk, I can feel the chair, and I can feel my coffee cup here, I can smell it. So really bringing myself down to focusing on my physical environment is one of my favorite ways of grounding myself that I like to use.
Yeah, wonderful. So it looks like we have maybe one final question here is having to do with whether or not we should limit the time we spend focusing on COVID-19. For an example, can we spend too much time watching the news or hearing or thinking about the pandemic? And that's a really good question because we're all interested. We all want to know, what's the latest and what's going on. So we're very, very curious. And with our increased screen time, that means that we have a constant feed of information that's always coming at us. And we can't say, hey, try and ignore it and make, pretend like it's not happening. But I think that, Laura, do you think there can be such a thing as kind of media overload about COVID-19?
Oh, for sure. I definitely can find that the more I pay attention to it, the more stressed I get. Going back to that feeling like there's so much I can't control about this. And while I would like information, I actually have had a ton of information at this point. And so definitely limiting how much children are exposed to it. But limiting how much we ourselves focus on the pandemic right now and everything about it. And so definitely setting some limits and then taking a break.
Right. I couldn't agree more. And it might be that we have to discipline ourselves to check those updates maybe just once a day instead of once an hour. Because nothing's really going to change. Like what you said before, there's nothing we can do to control it. So exposing ourselves to it every hour may be just inviting much more anxiety than we really need to into our lives. So thank you. Well, it has been wonderful kind of sharing some thoughts, and hopefully there's been some things that have been beneficial. Laura, I've really enjoyed kind of your perspective on things as well.
Thanks, Nick.
So should we close maybe then with just kind of a reminder on some important information. So again, we're calling it a warm line. Is that right, Laura?
So a support line.
A support line, excuse me. A support line that is 24/7, and the number to call for that support line is 252-6220.
Correct.
And then to access services, to meet with a counselor virtually without even having to leave your home, you can call the Center for Mental Health, and that number, Laura, was
252-3200. Okay. Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. So that's our business line. So anyone who wants to set up an appointment, that's the easiest way. But then the other line is available 24 hours a day, and if you get it wrong, we'll get you back to the right one.
Get you what you need. All right.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone, and hopefully we'll be visiting soon in the future. And good luck. We're all learning to cope with COVID-19. Thank you.
Everybody has a nice day. Enjoy some sunshine.